All right. Um, Calling the Monona Grove School Board of Education order 4:01 p.m. Has there been a declaration of public notice?
Yes, there has.
All right. So we have one possible action item today. It's revised bus transportation walk zones for 2021, 2022. Dan, I'll let you take over.
Hey, thank you, Lorraine. So you may recall last week's regular meeting, we had this as an agenda item and where you had an opportunity to review the preliminary plan for the, it's called the UHT plan, Unusually Hazardous Transportation Plan. And that based upon feedback from the board members, as well as some additional follow-up questions, that there was some going back and to answer some of the questions and actually some revisions made. So with that, to talk about, what that looks like and those revisions and the process, I think we'll turn it over to Jared then.
All right, thanks, Dan. Again, tonight joining us this afternoon is John with Taddy, and then his other team members, Christian and Amy. As Dan had stated at the last board meeting, there was we presented the initial draft of our Unusual Hazardous Transportation Plan, and we got some feedback, was able to take some of that feedback, which obviously was very helpful, and identified some areas that we could improve on. And obviously, I will let John specifically speak about how that information went in, but I do want to highlight, one of the comments that came up was the concern about Winnequa, and before the plan was that it only covered portion of it. Then there was the discussion that there was potentially with the apartment complexes that were coming in, that there could be some more traffic there. As we talked through that, we felt that was important because what happens if that happens in the middle of the school year, and trying to change walk zones or an unusual hazardous plan at that time is challenging. So based on that information, Taddy felt they were comfortable with expanding that all the way up Winnequa Road, all the way from Monona Drive, all the way through as a major artery. The other part of it is that as we try to keep this process consistent and not trying to pick and choose areas and trying to follow a process that is, objective, but yet making sure that we maintain safe walking distances for our students. And we have two different communities that are involved. And so if you recall, we talked about the threshold, that safety threshold in 4K. Kindergarten was going to be at 25. Then first through fifth grade was going to be at 75. And our middle school was going to be at 150. And both of those thresholds were thresholds that were lower than surrounding school districts were utilizing. However, we felt that we wanted to maintain that lower standard to be able to provide a little safer environment for our students. Based on that, we have a community that has sidewalks and a community that does not have sidewalks. And we obviously know that anytime anybody walks, there is added hazard to that. But we didn't want to, say one community was more important than the other community. So what we did is and I'll let John speak to this a little bit more, but we changed the scoring threshold to really around our first and second grade students. And we identified that if you were in a walk zone or an area that you did not have access to majority of your walking to school at first and second grade, that your safety threshold should drop down to 25. But if you had access to sidewalks, that we would remain at 75. So one of the biggest changes that you will see is really around the area for Winnequa. So really, if you look at the existing walk zone and then the proposed walk zone that we're talking about tonight, 4K through second grade will not have a change for next year. It will remain the exact same because that first and second graders will follow that threshold of 25, which puts them at the same category of 4K in kindergarten. So the only grades that will see an expanded walk zone to that proposal is third through fifth. And then obviously we included all of Winnequa. The other part that in Cottage Grove, we did remove the intersection of County N and BB, even though the village of Cottage Grove will provide two crossing guards there. The farther that we looked into this, we felt that obviously what happens if, a crossing guard is sick or doesn't happen to show up, and asking first and second graders to come that way and to maintain that 75. We removed that section from it. But the positive part is that we've been working with the village of Cottage Grove, and we'll continue to do that, as well as the city of Monona. And the recommendations that are put out by Taddy to improve some of the walk zones, if those recommendations are not done, it doesn't make those walk zones any less safe or the scoring to change. If they're done, it enhances the scoring and makes it even safer. But we did have confirmation from the village that they are going to place a crossing guard at the intersection of BB and Damascus. They do understand that there is some high visibility. Obviously, there's lots of visibility, but with more traffic potentially there and the community continuing to grow, that they will be placing a crossing guard there. So those were the updates that I had. So I'll just turn it over to John to walk through their scoring and their revisions.
Thanks, Jared. Just working on sharing my screen. All right, is the PowerPoint slide coming through?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Jared, thanks for that great introduction on what has happened in this past week regarding this plan. I have a couple slides before I show the maps, but as Jared mentioned, we're really doing this based on science and objective data. It's an exposure-based risk assessment system, but we did revise some thresholds based on some of the feedback we saw and the concerns about there not being sidewalks in some communities. So to do that, what we did is we broke up the elementary school and we looked at the first and second graders versus the third and fifth. And then for those first and second graders, if their routes without any sidewalk access, we're using a very conservative 25 threshold. And you'll see how that carries through on the exhibits then. Other updates, as Jared mentioned, crossing BB, Highway BB, that's a multi-lane arterial roadway. So what we did is we just designated that as an auto hazard for elementary school students. And also, as Jared mentioned, we'd considered Winnequa Road a collector roadway classification throughout the entire study area, which would make it an auto hazard for walking along for elementary school students. So to step through the exhibits, this is the before conditions, what was presented at the last meeting. And I'm just going to flip to the after, and we can flip before after a little bit. But I'll highlight some of the changes. Having Winnequa Road as a collector and auto hazard the whole way through means those homes that have access, those parcels that have access off of Winnequa Road are going to be in the hazardous section. We do believe there are areas that still can be crossed by Winnequa Road, particularly because we're using that threshold of 75 for third through fifth graders. We revised the southeast corner with some of the parcels that were in the school district that were grayed out before. And as Jared mentioned, the existing walk zone for 4K through second graders remains really close and tight to the school and is consistent with the existing, except for those homes along Winnequa Road that you need to access Winnequa Road. So Jared, I don't know if you'd like to stop and have a discussion about this specific school before we move on to the others, or if I should just go through them quick and then we can just come back with questions.
Why don't we go through the presentation, then we can come back. That way we can get through the entire.
Jared, I would strongly suggest that we do each on its own because the factors are so different. So I have specific questions on some of them and not on others. And if we wait until the end, then I'm taking you all the way back. Let's just do one school at a time and focus on that school and finish with that school. Then when we get to the end, we're done, rather than cranking all the way back to the start, having to review everything John already said about each building and then start over. So I would strongly recommend we do each at a time. he does his presentation, and then we can ask specific questions on that walk zone.
That's fine. I just want to remind that, each community is a little different, but we also are one united school district. So I don't want us to feel that one community is getting more, a different treatment than the others, but I'm fine with us walking through this and having you ask your questions, Susan.
No, hey, Jared, I totally agree. And I think the implication that a board member wouldn't be looking at each and every district building is not fair. I'm starting with this one only because this is the one, Exhibit 1, that John started. If you'd like to start at the end and work backwards, you feel that's fair, that's fine. He started with Exhibit 1. They've made changes to Exhibit 1. It's reasonable to start with the exhibit that John started with and follow his PowerPoint.
No problem. Go ahead and ask your question, Susan, please.
Okay, so John, would you just clarify? So as I understand it now, the present walk zone will relate to 4K through 2nd grade.
Correct.
Okay, so the extended walk zone applies to 3-5. Okay,
Correct.
so I just personally, as one of 7 board members, I strongly support that. So I walked this in the rain yesterday, and I agree that for a 6-year-old child coming across Winnequa Road in the rain with no sidewalks didn't feel safe even to me. And I almost got ran over twice by cars because the road is so narrow and there's parking on some sides of certain of these roads. So I'm pretty good. I also went to the far end, the far north, I don't know if that's the south end, but that far end up there, and did that distance because it's pretty significant. But I think by adding 4K2, we're okay with that. Some of our 3rd graders are not as mature, but most of those are good solid back roads. They do not have sidewalks though. And I think it's really important that without sidewalks, you have that child in the road. They're relatively narrow. Some of those roads allow parking on one side. And when 2 cars are coming, one in each direction, there is a child in the street and there's parking on. So I would say we need to go back and look at, and I would say the same thing for the Cottage Grove roads. I have serious concerns about Damascus, where there is parking on one side of the road. I think that's a consideration for the space that's then given to the child walking when there is traffic coming from both sides. So that's one point I want to make. The other point I want to make is I've really studied the 3-way stop. I'm concerned about Birchhaven Circle and have been from the very beginning because of the 3-way stop and because of the hill. So if you walk that is a significant hill. If you drive it, you're accelerating up the hill. If the weather is the least bit bad, and that's why the city of Monona has, upon several requests, not put a 4-way stop there. So I think it's important that you understand that the history is there have been requests for 4-way stops, and that has not occurred because of the steepness of the hill. Without the 4-way stop, when you're a student looking down the road and to the right and forward, you have to look at whether or not the car that's coming from the other directions has come to a full and complete stop before you're safe crossing. And as the cars come up the hill, they accelerate. So it's easy to say, yeah, you can put another stop sign up there. The city at this point has not done that. You can also put a very significant crosswalk sign there, it still makes it difficult when they're accelerating in bad weather to slow down because they see a student stopped at that sign. So I still have, I mean, that can't be more than 10 or 15 kids. So I'm concerned about that. And I want validation that the green area on Toniawatha has satisfactory cross areas to across Winnequa Road. I mean, again, I was driving Winnequa Road and I was past, I had two cars behind me. I was going 27 miles an hour and they were both on my tail. So generally, even though the speed limit is 25, the students are confronted with often 30-mile-an-hour traffic, and there are no sidewalks on these roads. There are also no sidewalks, virtually no sidewalks leading up to these roads until you get to Nichols and Dean. So again, in the concerns are even stronger in Cottage Road because the speeds are higher on those roads. So I really appreciate that you've reevaluated this. I think this brings an incredible safety measure to the district. But these two areas, I think, still create concern. And that far area from Winnequa School without sidewalks, it's a significant walk. It's at least a mile. And you have to go on to a variety of different roads, or if they walk Winnequa, which they probably would not, it's not really a safe walking street. So I'd appreciate your comments on that.
Sure. I will start with this section up here.
John, could you be a little nearer the mic?
Yes, definitely.
Great.
How's that?
Great.
All right. How do you pronounce this again? Toniawatha?
Toniawatha.
Okay, Toniawatha. To access this area, we looked at our evaluation of crossing Winnequa Road, both at Progressive Lane and at the all-way stop at Dean Avenue. And using our methodology and seeing both of these locations in the field and knowing, taking into account the volumes and speed on Winnequa Road, we are comfortable having this part of the walk zone for third graders through fifth graders to be able to access this neighborhood at either of those locations. So that would be.
What's the stop sign at Dean Road? How many stop signs do you have there?
It's an all-way stop.
Four-way, yeah.
Okay, and isn't that the section where Roygan comes in and it's difficult for cars to be able to determine where the stop is? Or is that further down?
They stop at Rothman as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they stop right there and look. So it's pretty clear. That's the area I live in, and I'm totally.
I know, but the cars go through that stop sign because of the Rothman sign being confusing because they can't tell if they've already stopped there, if they can go ahead. So again, John, I just ask you to just go look at that another time and with my concerns stated and validate in your own mind that a student will understand all the different corners. If they're coming out of Rothman on to Dean, again, they have to stop again, but some of them don't understand that. So it just is a hazardous intersection. I'd just like you to look at it again to make sure you're comfortable with that.
Thank you, Susan. And we have been looking at it this past week and definitely understand that the five-way nature of it.
Yeah.
We also know, Progressive Lane is another access point that you can reach all of these properties. if Winnequa Road is crossed at that point. And again, that's another spot on a straight section of Winnequa Road with good sight distance in both ways.
Well, I think the possibility that the kids from the far end of Toniwatha are going to come down Winnequa and cross is also relatively high. So I just think that creates a concern. And again, these streets don't have sidewalks. And so when there are two cars on these streets and a walker or biker, and you're talking about the Lake Loop, it pushes one car over into the safety area where a person walks.
Well, I would ascertain that this is a community that people, drivers have the expectation that there's going to be people in the streets because there's not sidewalks. This isn't necessarily unique to municipalities throughout Wisconsin. I can think of
It's not an accurate assumption in this community right now. And one of the focuses, I think, that the new police chief is spoken about, in fact, on television, is speeding enforcement in the community. And to the effect that we've had elected officials who have sped understanding the risk to children through these roads. Generally, if you stand on Winnequa Road closer to Bridge, that traffic in front of Frost Woods runs at 30 plus miles an hour. And you will see that frequently on Winnequa Road. Now, again, I'm just talking about the risk of that road, the width of the road, the no sidewalks, and the general speed of traffic. Have them put up one of the traffic signs and watch the speed at which people come by. That'll give you a very clear idea of what you're generally looking at. And the later they're running and the more blockage at Bridge Road, the faster they go. I'm just saying we need to make this safe for our children, and I'm not completely. I really appreciate the steps you've made, but I think we're so close to really making it comfortable that we should seriously consider, though, particularly the Birchhaven area. There's only one way out of there, one way, and that's at the three-way stop on a hill. Assuming that everybody else stops at the three-way stop, and you don't know when they're going to start with the child standing at the third stop sign.
Thank you, Susan. We just don't want to spend so much time on one debate. We're going to let other board members also ask questions. Susan Fox.
I just muted myself again. Yeah, I, as I said, live on that section of Toniwatha, so I walk that all the time. I also just this afternoon drove through all of these areas again. And I drove down Rothman because I went all the way to Winnequa because I was checking the mileage as well from way up at the most northern part near Parkway Drive to Winnequa. It's just about a mile. So anyway, I drove through that intersection, and it's you do, if you're going to go on to Winnequa from Rothman, you are going to make a left, but there's an immediate stop sign right there. So the car would have to stop. And there's very good visibility of all four of all of those streets when they come in. So if a student were crossing, they would be visible. There are crosswalks there. They could be marked more clearly, I think. Progressive, similarly, there are clear crosswalks. We could ask the city to make them more clear. In fact, I noticed the city's out painting yellow lines down the middle of the roads. So perhaps they're updating the crosswalks as well. I had suggested using some of that flashy green color. We just had a conversation with an alder who is on the Public Works Committee, which deals with roads. And she said the city would be open to considering, additional crosswalks if we feel they're needed. She also specifically said that this Birchhaven to Schluter Road intersection, she felt the city would take a look at whether a stop sign should be put there or a more visible crosswalk. I also did that drive around Birchhaven, came out, actually the hill, it is pretty close to the top of where the hill crests, because when you continue on down Winnequa, if you're coming up from where there's that bend and you're coming, I guess you're going east, sort of up Winnequa Road, it's very good visibility. And the main hill part is from this lower part of Winnequa and Schluter. And you can see it quite well. And it's not as steep as I was remembering it in my head from bike riding days, I guess. So it looked to me not so bad, even with a three-way stop, if there were a very clear crosswalk there. But she indicated that it wouldn't be out of line to ask the city to consider making it a four-way stop. She didn't seem to feel the hill was a problem. It's not that steep a hill, and maybe it's been rejected before. The city has just added a couple more crosswalks. People are complaining about them. They don't really like them. They're not real popular. But it is possible that that's something, the recommendations that you had in your report might be considered by the city differently this time. I also appreciate all the work you did I feel much more comfortable with this as it is with the larger walk zone, the 3 through 5. I think that makes sense. I was pretty concerned about the idea of first graders coming all the way from, say, Parkway to Winnequa, because there are a lot of cars. Some of the streets have parking on both sides, not just one side, and they are narrower. And I know in the winter, sometimes even walking on the sidewalks isn't the best. So it just depends. But I assume we'll offer a buy a seat program as well, so that if parents aren't comfortable, they'll have that option. So anyway, I appreciate your work, and I'm comfortable with this plan for this school as it is.
Thanks, Susan.
Eric?
I jog that, well, I try to every day. I don't always make it every day, but almost. And first of all, Susan, that is a tough hill, okay? So don't say that's not a big hill, because that's a tough hill to jog up.
Not just my memory. I was remember it being hard when I was riding bikes.
But since I know that area really well, because I really literally almost see it every day, I guess I'm trying to understand, Susan Manning, your concerns is that because it's in the zone now for the 3rd to 5th, right? If I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah.
So you're saying, Susan Manning, that it's actually the cross from that Schluter Road, crossing from the Birchhaven community over there, is what you're concerned about. Is that right? I just wanted to try to understand that.
That's exactly correct. And I appreciate the fact that they've extended the busing zone through the 2nd grade students.
Yeah.
Because I do feel that's extremely dangerous at that corner. And I appreciate that Susan Fox also went out and looked. But I think if you get out of your car and stand at that stop sign coming onto Winnequa from Birchhaven, it's very difficult and so 3rd grade would be 10-year-old, 9-year-old. It's kind of difficult for a student to assess the speed of the car coming up the hill, because it is steep and there will be acceleration. It's also difficult if you have 2 cars at the other stop signs to ascertain who's going to go first and whether you can go straight.
Okay.
So
Eric, did you want to finish?
That was the puffer.
Yeah, I just wanted to just confirm
Oh,
that.
not so good.
Just wait. Let me finish my one thing. And it's because I do think that it's hard to see cars on that hill. I know it because I even just jogging going with or against traffic, it's hard for me to see them. And sometimes they do kind of, they move down there, and it can get really busy too, especially during the morning and after work. So I would also agree that specific area would be somewhat of a concern for me too. So that's what I wanted to say.
Susan, Manning, did you want to elaborate or anything on what you said before?
No, thank you. And Eric, thank you for, asking me that question and and thank you guys for those of you, just so you know, Jared, I also did the Cottage Grove work as well. But like Eric, I walk this, and when you're on Winnequa Road at that intersection, and there's a person on one side and two cars coming from different ways, that road becomes extremely narrow for a student on the road.
Thank you, Susan. I think we can go ahead and move on to the next.
So,
Okay, the next
Lorene,
one.
one thing, the other thing I might add is that if, depending upon how John wants to move forward with the concerns, and we know that Jared has a time frame where he kind of needs to have this met. If as a board, we want to, like, for instance, approve the busing for the new school and or Glacial Drumlin, if those are connected, and then maybe the next week, depending upon whatever changes, we do the next ones. I just want us to stay open to consider. We do not have to vote on, make it clear, we don't have to vote on the full plan today. We can go for what looks good.
Dan, did you want to share anything in regards to that?
Sure. So the board does need to approve a plan. So you're not approving individual walk zones, you're approving the plan in its entirety. So you're correct. You can, hopefully today you'll have an opportunity that you're ready to vote. If you choose not to, then you don't. But to be clear that the UHT plan is what we're seeking board approval on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, John, you can continue.
All right, this one should be an easy one. No changes. 4K, 5K students to Taylor Prairie. It's the 25 threshold, and keeps it tight to their school.
Susan?
I just wanted to ask John, so it appears that the distance around the Taylor Prairie School for 4K5 is, when I kind of tried to drive that, it's basically their property plus one block. And so what percentage does that bring them to if you use that plan? So this is significantly reduced, even though there are some sidewalks on the outlying roads and there appears to be access into this area.
Right.
So just so you know, I totally support this plan. It just looks different from our other 4K5 plan.
Yeah, and the reason being is we have a part of our scoring system is if any road scores over 5 points to cross it. And the reason these roadways are wider in this school district, so students are exposed to, they're just in the roadway longer to cross it. And that's why those become hazards.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, good question.
Okay, John, it doesn't appear to be any other questions.
Okay, great. Cottage Grove. Before, when we discussed this one, there's some concerns about having students cross Highway BB to access these neighborhoods here. That would be an expansion of where the existing walk zone is. So we took another look at this, and the proposed plan is to draw the line at BB. We'd expect this neighborhood to be part of the walk zone upon completion, provided there was access to it, by using an automatic hazard of, not expecting elementary school students to cross a multi-lane roadway. It sounds like the village is still going to put 2 crossing guards at this location, and we had quite a few engineering recommendations that we think could improve the safety of this location for the community. But that is the change that we're proposing to this plan.
John, and there's no questions.
Okay. For Granite Ridge Elementary School, we are not proposing any changes, but we did find out some additional info that a crossing guard will be provided at BB and Damascus Trail. So there may be, well, it's more applicable on the next school where the walk zone goes beyond BB, but that will, help reduce crash risk through this area. Susan, I believe you had some concerns with the crossing at Bus Road. In our opinion, based on the proposed engineering solutions there to reduce the speed limit to 35 miles per hour at a high visibility crosswalk, flashing beacons, and then lead students up to that location, we're comfortable with a crossing for 3rd through 5th graders at that location. And that's our opinion based on reevaluation of this.
Susan?
The village is expanding that road dramatically. There's already significant traffic, and even you're saying they're going to bring the speed limit down to 35 miles an hour. And a student is going to cross that road looking both ways. And isn't it going to be 4-lane?
Not at this point, it's not 4-lane. In addition, it's going to be school zone, so it's 15 miles per hour.
I'm seriously concerned about that road. I think it will, knowing if that's additional information I did not have, that it would be decreased, and you're going to put a crossing guard there, right?
A high
The village has
visibility
agreed to that?
crosswalk, but Jared, I don't believe there's current plans for a crossing guard.
The village is not placing a crossing guard there at this point.
But it is the flashing lights and crosswalk, right? I thought that's what we talked about way back when we were talking about this development.
Yep, so in the development
It makes
agreement is a high visible crosswalk. In addition to that, obviously we can continue to monitor that there's not a large number of students that live in that area. And speaking with Reed, he's fine with that. If we do find that it's, we can obviously go back and have a conversation with the village to add a crossing guard. In addition, we do provide supervision for our students in the morning. So if we do have to reallocate supervision throughout there to monitor that, we can do that as well if need be.
All right. Again, part of the complication has been, I think, particularly now, and it's harder to look at it as objectively as I would like, and that is the construction on Bus Road that's affected BB and the traffic on BB. But I think you get a good look of kind of what happens if what's happening is the traffic is coming off of Vilas Road once construction is completed, and we'll be using Bus Road as the connecting road to Gaston, which then gets you out to the interstate. I appreciate that the village is going to put safety measures onto that area. But boy, I think it's really important, John, that you guys look at the speed that cars drive on those roads in reality, not what the speed limit is, the speed that cars drive on that road.
And well, Susan, I will mention that it is built into our the way we evaluate this, that we expect drivers are driving faster than the speed limit.
All right, thank you, Susan. There are no other questions, John.
All right, glacial drumlin. Middle school with a threshold of 150. There were no changes to this proposed plan, except that we found out that there will be a crossing guard at the intersection of BB and Damascus Trail. And so, Susan, this is definitely an intersection I know you were concerned about. And, you know, I agree that crossing BB is a difficult thing to do, especially when you're not at a traffic signal. If you're just at a stop sign and trying to pick a gap, there's 4 lanes of traffic. It can be moving pretty fast, and it gets busy. But with the installation of the traffic signal there and some of the features they have, such as the countdown timers, I even have a little video of one of the safety features they have at the traffic signal. I'll bring this up here. If I can get my computer to work here. All right, so I'm going to go back to the start here. It's a quick video, but what is available right now on at least 2 of the legs of this intersection, it's called a leading pedestrian interval. And what it does is it gives the pedestrians who push the button a head start of 4 seconds to get out and be visible while all other traffic is stopped. And that's something we've recommended that be done at all of the legs of this intersection. You can see it took about 4 seconds before the green light came on. So that's a good safety feature that's being used throughout the country now, particularly in urban areas near schools. So we're comfortable with students being able to cross this, and I think it's just an added benefit that the village is proposing a crossing guard here. But I'm happy to discuss it.
Again, I just know that that's it's a tough intersection, and people are coming in from a significantly high speed into that school district area. And I appreciate that there's a light there and we're going to be doing that work, but you go from a 45-mile-an-hour zone to a 55-mile-an-hour zone, and then you're coming back down again. The coming back down often doesn't happen until you
Actually,
get to
35. Yeah.
I wanted to correct you, Susan Manning. You know, that's a 25-mile-an-hour zone until you pass the light going out of Cottage Grove.
Okay, so where's it turn to 20? Andrew, where does it turn to 25?
At the light. When you're coming from Monona, it goes from 45 to 25, right when you hit the corner where the CVS is. So there is no speed there. And also the 4-second delay is actually great for the kids crossing the street at the time.
What's the speed limit? What's the speed limit as you come past Vilas?
So it's 55, then it hits to 45 from what is that? Bus road to no, what is it? Yeah, from Bus Road to Damascus, it's when it goes from 55 to 45. Then when it gets to the light, it goes to 25.
Yeah, I thought there was a 35 in there somewhere too.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. I'm looking at it right now.
As you go past,
is it 45?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 35 west of the intersection, 25 east of the intersection.
Right. Yeah. Not 45, 35. Yep.
Yeah.
To what point? Again, at Vilas, what's the speed limit? Which is, I mean, those are kind of your points as you're coming into the village.
At Vilas, I'm seeing 50 miles per hour.
Mm-hmm.
At Vilas.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, that distance is relatively short, but you're saying then you bring them down to 35. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, there are definitely things that can be done from an engineering perspective or from a enforcement perspective. If people are not adhering to that reduction in speed limit, there's dynamic speed feedback signs. There's enforcement strategies. So there's things that could be done from the engineering and enforcement standpoint. If speeds were of a particular concern beyond what the posted speed limit is here.
And John and Jared, I think you said this before, but if we see a need for a change, can we make revisions afterwards? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think as these communities, particularly Cottage Grove, continues to grow, but it sounds like there'll be some development potentially in the Monona area as well. So I think anything's up for reevaluation if traffic volumes or roadway cross sections change. If something like Bus Road was ever changed to a multi-lane roadway, you maybe want to reconsider it then.
Correct. And I can also let you know the recommendations that Teddy's making for like road improvements are definitely being shared with municipalities, and I will continue to work with them to improve areas we can. Example, obviously getting the crossing guard positioned at BB and Damascus, obviously looking at some timing in BB, but then specifically working with Monona to get potentially additional stop signs or additional painting areas. And that's just continuing. But before we've sat down and had a full-fledged meeting, I wanted to make sure the board was comfortable with these walk zones, because obviously if there's areas that were not included, I think it's more important for us to prioritize what our requests are from the municipalities, because they probably can't do everything at one time. And so I want to be able to prioritize that.
John, there's no other questions.
I'm down to my last slide. This is part of the process. It's an iterative, it's discussion. I'm glad to see that so many of you were out in your community taking a look at if you feel comfortable with these walk zones. That's great. It's good to see that. I mean, I think that the students can feel rest assured that they have a good school board that's looking out for their needs.
Thank you for the compliment.
You're welcome. So, Jared, is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
I do not have anything. The document that we had shared this time obviously included some of the educational pieces, but this would be the document that would also be forwarded on to the Sheriff's Department for their records, and also the Department of Public Instruction.
All right, so I guess we can call a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve the walk zone plan as presented.
I second.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? Susan?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable. I appreciate the fact that John went out there and made these major revisions that were major concerns of mine. But I'm still uncomfortable with even with the light and all the structure of Cottage Grove Road for those students. And I'm still concerned about the 2 zones for the elementary at Winnequa. And in fact, the concern with Cottage Grove Road goes to both Granite Ridge and Glacial Drumlin. if I had, I mean, what we're effectively doing as a board is saying, we're gonna expect the village and the town and the city of Monona to fix these potentially hazardous spots. I think this is on us. This is on us to make it safe at this time. And then if in fact the four-way stop is approved, then we can expand the busing into, for instance, Birch Haven. Or once we are fully assured, in fact, I would have the speed limit change sooner. I would have it changed to 35 at Vilas Road. That traffic comes through there at a high level speed. So I'm concerned about the safety of our children on this road, having known a child that was actually hit on Vilas Road. I mean, that is going to happen. But I feel it's my responsibility in governance to feel comfortable with this plan. And I would like to see at least one last evaluation of those before I can approve this.
Thank you, Susan. Susan Fox, and then Elizabeth.
Well, I would point out that as unfortunate as it was that a student was hit on Vilas Road, that has nothing to do with this plan because that was a piece of Vilas Road that's south of Cottage Grove Road. But I think that, I guess I just want to reiterate a comment that John made, which is that using all the algorithms and considerations that they applied here, this is a safe plan, and that the requests for how it could become even more safe, enhanced safety, I think is the term you used, are those requests to the municipalities. And so I think if people feel that this isn't safe, then there should either be a proposed amendment or maybe vote against it. But if you feel it's safe now, that doesn't preclude us. I mean, I would assume we would still go forward, Jared, with some of those requests because they were good. I thought they were very thoughtful and they're all good requests and doable, I think.
Yes, I would.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think, you know, for me, what we're doing as a board is taking a look at the data and the information that's in front of us, right? Provided by experts for whom this is their job, science-based and evidence-based. And while I appreciate kind of the personal experiences and the emotional appeals, of which are also data, right? But when you add that to the pool of what we have, to me, the preponderance of data and evidence is that this plan is solid, it's science-backed, and I think that to me is what is good and good enough. So I appreciate you going back and relooking at these things. I know it was not a small amount of work. I appreciate the adjustments that you made in Monona. That makes sense to me. And so I think that it's a good plan, and I think we should move it forward.
Susan, Manning?
I would just mention that the observations that I made and the watching that I did, although I'm not a certified engineer, I am a parent who clearly understands well what students do at crossings that may not be completely safe, such as a three-way stop on a high hill. And I kind of resent the fact that you feel like my opinion has been emotional. I've walked this, I drove it. I've had children on these roads. And I think we are incredibly close to fairly safe, but we're not quite there yet. So I think we have to be respectful of each other as we approach these issues. And we know that we've had children who walk these routes. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. All right. I think, are we ready then to vote? Andrew?
Oh, yeah, you go ahead and
We'll go ahead and do a roll call?
yeah,
Okay.
we do the roll call.
All right, I'm gonna call a roll call vote. Susan Fox,
Aye.
Susan Manning,
Nay.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Eric,
Nay.
Peter,
Aye.
Maureen, aye. Ayes have it.
Oh,
Motion
aye.
is, oh, sorry, Andrew, my bad. All right, so ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right. And I think that's it. So we can move to adjournment. Have a motion for adjournment?
I'd move to adjourn.
Second.
I'll second that.
All right, I think that was Elizabeth. All right, I'll just do a roll call vote, but I don't think we need to. Susan Fox,
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Oh, aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Did you hear? All right, there we go. And Lorraine, aye. Ayes have it.
Hey, wait,
Meetings, yes. Oh, trying to get y'all the squares. Susan Manning.
two Susans.
All right, ayes have it. Motion is carried. Meeting is adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.
All right.
Night, everyone.